Hello and welcome everyone, Lionheart here with the buyer's guide, the long-awaited buyer's guide for PC. There will also be a buyer's guide for laptops following up this video too. Now the reason why these were delayed so long is initially I'd planned on uploading them towards the end of August while I was away on holiday, but my internet where I was staying cut out, thus I was unable to make the recording and upload them. And when I got back, very little time between when I got back from holiday and the release of Rome 2, which has kept me busy pretty much up until now. Another reason why I've waited a little bit longer is also to see how the optimization is coming along with Rome 2. Now, I'm not saying I'm doing these buyer's guides purely so that you guys can build a PC for Rome 2. I'm also building them in mind or putting together the parts I've selected so that you guys should be able to play, the latest games on reasonable settings. Ideally, most of the time I'm trying to get you a computer or some parts that are going to help max out these games or give you as near to top performance as possible while still remaining smooth and playable. So, I've got two PCs builds that I'm going to show you from parts. One is a kind of a cheaper option and one is a far more expensive one. Now some of you may have already clocked the little price at the top here and thinking that £655 isn't that cheap. However, I already have a few ways of cutting down this price even more. Basically what I've tried to do is give you guys a PC build that is going to last as well, so that you don't need to keep coming back. But that being said, I have chosen perhaps some more expensive parts purely because I know how well they run, or I know that they're going to last for a while and they're going to be worth the price. So I don't obviously have like a cheap £400 PC build. Generally, if you're looking into PC gaming, it's never a bad thing to wait a few more months and save up, because prices are generally always coming down for most components because new components get released all the time. So if you are sort of thinking you had a £400 budget but you're realising actually you might need closer to £500 to build this PC, then it may well be worth you saving up a little bit more. I know that's obviously a horrible thing to say because you desperately want to build a PC or you desperately want to buy a PC, but so that you're not disappointed with the performance, better to wait and save up and get slightly more powerful kit, so that way you're also not re-upgrading all the time as well. Now I should state that I'm by no means a computer parts expert or anything like that. I'm purely going off my own experience, and this is kind of what I would choose to go for. By all means, customize, choose different things, completely disagree with me if you want. I'm purely putting up these buyer's guides because people have requested them, and I like to help out where I can. And obviously people are going to have different tastes. Now you'll also notice that I'm not including any AMD processors or graphics cards, so that's completely up to your choice if you want to use AMD graphics cards. Personally, I haven't followed them recently, but I know that Nvidia are doing great stuff with their current series of graphics cards across the last two series actually. Processor wise, Intel is more powerful. AMD is a lot cheaper, but Intel is far more powerful. And right now they are really showing AMD the door in terms of processors. And for most games now, more and more games are making use of more cores. Total War sometimes excluded from that, but they're doing their best to optimize that for more core users. In fact, Rome does use multiple cores, it just probably doesn't use them that well. Anyway, so first of all we're looking at kind of my cheaper PC, which some of you, as I said, are going to stagger thinking that £655 is cheap. But I've already included a few ways where you guys can drop down that price already, so bear with me in the video. I'm just going to go over the parts I've chosen so far. So I've chosen a Novitec branded case called the Prowler MIDI Case V3. It's only £30, which for a case is pretty darn decent. It should hold most of the latest graphics cards, but Novitec have a great live chat feature, so if you do have any concerns that your graphics card may not fit in this case, you can always talk to them on the live chat before you buy and ask if it will fit, and they're more than happy to help you. I should also say the reason why I'm using Novitec is because I've used them for over 8-9 years now. They've always given me great customer service. I'm not doing this as a promotion for them at all. I'm no way affiliated with them, but I'm just using it because I know my way around their website. I find it very easy to use. They also may not be completely the cheapest either. Might be a few pounds difference here and there, but I just like the way they have all their stuff like that, and they often have great deals too. And I'm also going there for customer service as well as the product. So we've got the Novitec Prowler MIDI Case V3. I've gone for a 4th generation Intel i5 4670K, which is a stock clock of 3.4 GHz, which I believe will turbo clock to 3.7, 3.8. Now the reason I've gone for the 4th generation Intel Core processor is because the third generation processors, which Novatech still have on their site, and this may be different on other sites, but they're pretty much the same price. So you might as well go for the latest, the fourth generation processor. If you can find an older 3.1, kind of substantially cheaper. So if you could find an i5 3570K, which was the previous i5K edition in the third generation series, that's more than kind of, I'd say, 20 or 30 pounds difference, then go for that. But really, if there's not a huge amount of price difference, go for the fourth generation, because it's going to last longer and they're good processors. The K means that you can overclock it as well. You're not just restricted to the turbo boost, and that's why I generally promote getting a K edition processor, because it means you can in a way improve your own game performance by overclocking a couple of years down the line when your processor perhaps starts to come into a few issues. But these processors shouldn't, they should be fine. Gone for a Gigabyte motherboard, pretty standard. It's basically the cheapest one of the Z87 series that Novatech had on the 1150 socket, which is required for fourth generation Intel processors. Gone for a really cheap DVD drive. It's pretty standard, and it's going to be fine. You can obviously change that if you wanted a better one, or Blu-ray or something like that. I've gone for an OCZ series 650 watt power supply. Now I cannot stress this enough, do not go for a cheap unbranded power supply. A lot of companies have their own branded power supplies. I would check to find out if they have 80 plus bronze certificates, or even silver or gold, because that means basically the power won't fluctuate and it won't be unreliable. You want a good solid power supply. Please don't go for the ones that are like £20, or for Americans $30 or something like that, that are unbranded but they're cheap, and you think, oh, I've got a good deal here, because you do run the risk of shorting out your entire computer. And you won't just take your power supply with it, you could take everything else too, and that is a lot of money. So I would go for something reliable. Either go for OCZ or Corsair. For this cheaper build I've gone for OCZ. For a more expensive build I've gone for Corsair, which we'll see in a bit. But OCZ is a good branded power supply maker. They're solid. And then we've gone for a 1TB Seagate Barracuda hard drive. Now some people prefer Western Digital or other brands of hard drive, completely up to you, but that's about 50 quid, which is pretty good. You get a terabyte of space, which is plenty in this day and age. I haven't put an SSD in there because generally I don't think you'll need one on a cheap build. You want to try and keep it minimal, so you want to go for a nice big solid hard drive. It's 7,200 RPM, which is pretty much the standard for hard drives these days. I've gone for an 8 gig set of G.Skill rip jaws, and they're at 1,600 megahertz. Dual channel RAM, and they're just under 60 quid. Now you could go for 4 gig, but more and more games are becoming more and more demanding, and extra RAM is always good. You don't need to go for 16 gig right now. 8 gig is fine. And then to wrap it all up, we've gone for a GeForce GTX 660 Ti Nvidia graphics card. That's at £160. Now I'm going to be showing you in a moment a few options of where you can lower the price, both at motherboard and graphics card. But basically, this current setup here should be able to play when Rome 2 is perfectly optimized and drivers are out and helping to. This should be able to run the game, at ultra, possibly even extreme settings. The GTX 660 Ti edition has nearly, I think, 400 more CUDA cores than the GTX 660, which helps it with all its processing and rendering and things like that. So if you can, I'd always go for the Ti edition over the standard 660, and even on Novatech there's only about a £5 difference between the GTX 660 and the 660 Ti, so if you can, go for a Ti. But obviously that is £655. That does not include an operating system. I'm still using Windows 7 and I'm more than happy to use it. You can pick up a copy of Windows 7 for about £70. So adding on to that, that would take the price of this computer to a whopping £720 or £25, which is quite a lot. So I'm going to scale it back a little bit. Processor wise, the only way you're going to get it any cheaper than this for a good, reliable, solid gaming processor is going over to AMD. Now, I did say previously that Intel are owning AMD in terms of performance. I've found, I'm sure there'll be some people that disagree with me on that point, but that doesn't mean that AMD isn't worth looking into if you're on a tight budget. Well, I'm not going to go into too much of the AMD stuff here. If we go quickly over to the AMD processor perhaps to look at from the AMD range, if we look over, we've got the pile driver and the bulldozer ones. But the pile driver, we've got an 8-core. Now don't let 8 cores be all flashy and go, ooh, look at that. Probably something, if you're looking for a cheaper processor, that isn't going to cost as much. Something like the AMD Piledriver FX 6-core 6300 Black Edition is going to be a good processor. It's got a high clock speed, and you should be able to pick up a motherboard for that for around about £60-70. In fact, I'll check that for you because I'm so kind. That's an AM3 Plus socket, and AMD don't change their motherboard sockets around as much as Intel do. So these are kind of the slightly better AM3 socket boards. That's about £90 for that one. But if we go back, there are some cheaper ones under the 970 chipset, and there's some even more cheap ones under the 760. But I would avoid them if you don't have to go near them too much. It's better to get a remotely decent motherboard. So there's not too many here. They're all around about the 60 quid mark. So you could go for an Asus one here, but generally you're already saving yourself nearly £80 just by going for an AMD processor. So taking off £80, let's say we're back down to £640. How could you reduce the cost further? Well, if you're still with the Intel processor, you could get rid of this motherboard here, which is £92, and you could halve that by going for the Asus H81 Intel H81 socket, which is compatible with that i5 processor. It's cheaper, it's only $49.99. It is a reasonable motherboard. It's nothing special, nothing flashy, but it will get the job done. It will take your processor, and it will take a graphics card in there as well. Shush phone update. So that way you could save off 40, but anyway. Another place you can save a lot of money, nearly £60, is by lowering the graphics card and going from a GTX 660 Ti to a GTX 650 Ti. That is only £99. You do cut the CUDA cores pretty much in half, but it should still be able to run games like Rome Total War on high or very high settings, perhaps even up to ultra. I'm purely speculating here because, without pretty much testing the card out and without further optimization from the Creative Assembly, I can't really tell, but it should be able to run most games pretty much on very high or ultra settings. It's a very capable card, and it's quite affordable as well. So those are those little changes there. So if you were to add that graphics card in, if we were using the AMD setup there, we were at £640. We could get it to around about £580 plus the Windows operating system on there. You would be looking at a total of around about £630, £630, something like that. And if you all know what that is in dollars, so we put £640, that would be $1,026. Now that does sound like a lot, but you also have to remember in the US, generally I've found PC parts are cheaper and far more affordable. So you can probably build a PC like this for perhaps $600 to $800, something like that. But that's something you're going to have to work out and find out yourself. I've also shown an optional, if people wanted a solid state drive, you can get a 128 gig one for £67, which is pretty decent. That's not too bad. That's quite a bit of space. You could have your operating system on there and 1 or 2 games if you wanted them to load faster. For £67, that's not too bad. Now, I was just going to compare basically what we've built in custom parts to what Novatech currently offer as pre-built machines. Now, these don't come with operating systems either, but you can add them on. So the closest thing to what we're looking at is something like this. The Novatech Black NTI 78 or 78. It has 8 gig of memory, it has a 1 terabyte hard drive, it's got a i5 processor, and it's got a GTX 650 Ti graphics card. That is, of course, without operating system. If you want to add something on like just Windows 7 Home, that's going to take up to £700. So that is quite a lot. But let's look at the processor. The processor isn't overclockable. It's a lower clock speed. The RAM is probably just standard generic stuff. It does come with a solid state drive. So if solid state's your thing, maybe that might be a better deal. Standard gaming case, but it's enough to fit it all in. Looks fine. It comes obviously with that 650 Ti graphics card, and it's got that Gigabyte 81 motherboard in there. And it has Novatech's Power Station 500 watt PSU. If they're putting it together with that, the power supply for that should be fine. Novatech's power stations are alright, but I would always strive if you can to go for OCZ or Corsair, far more reliable brands. You also get a wireless keyboard and mouse, so that's kind of an optional extra. So in terms of actual, if you took out the solid state drive and then whacked in the better processor, you'd probably have pretty much a similar price. So that's actually pretty reasonable. If you're looking for, you're sort of saying, well, that's still too much, I've only got, I can only push to £500. What you could probably look at, so you've got the AMD 6-core, the 6300, which I talked about earlier. It comes with an ATI Radeon HD 7770, 1GB graphics card. It comes with 8GB of RAM, and that's got a 2TB hard drive in there, so it's more space. That should be able to run games on high settings fine, and that's £519. But I said, shop around, go to your your local sites that you use. I'm purely putting these spec lists together on what I'd kind of roughly have a look at. If you're into building your own PC, and it's not that difficult, there's plenty of YouTube videos showing you step by step how to build one as well, so don't let that put you off. So this build essentially is around about the $1,000 mark. But I should say, I often get people saying, oh, can you spec a PC for $1,000? Unless I use an American website or PC Part website, I'm probably, it's going to be more expensive me doing it just by converting the cash. But what I'm aiming to do is not necessarily, you don't have to take my word, at these prices and things like that, but perhaps at least showing you some components which I think are worthwhile looking into. So even if you think that's way too much still, at least now you know some of the components I'd personally recommend having a look at, and then you can just tweak them down. You can always go down a scale with the graphics card from the 660 Ti to the 650 Ti, or if you know your AMD cards, you can go over to one of them. Same with the processors. Personally, I prefer Intel, and I find they give me far better performance. That's why I've chosen them. But yeah, so that is my cheaper custom built spec list as such. As I said, not an expert, and don't pretend to be, but those would be the parts that I would be looking for if I had a budget of around about £600. Obviously, you've got to take into account you've got to put an operating system on there. If you've already got an operating system, you can install it on there and request a new activation code from Microsoft, providing that you don't have that copy of Windows installed on any other PC. So if you're getting rid of an old PC and getting a brand new one, you're totally it's totally legal for you to request a new code, because you're only allowed the install on one PC at the same time. So that may mean you don't have to shell out for a brand new copy of whatever Windows operating system you want to use. So let's close that tab down, and we're instantly going to come across to the wrong tab I wanted this one. So this is kind of, if you've got a lot of money to spend, throwing all over the place, looking up to the £800 budget mark. This will also cover a PC of around about £700 as well. And that will be kind of getting close to the realm of the previous PC, but obviously the previous PC I showed you where you could downgrade quite a bit. I'm showing you where you can downgrade a little bit in this in terms of graphics cards, but generally this is for the enthusiast that has a lot of money and wants to build a system that is going to max out games and last a long time. So at £857, that should be around about $1,200, $1,300 or so. I will check that quickly. Very briefly, just check that there. That is $1,300. But as I said, I'm only doing that conversion because I often get people asking me, well, how much is that in dollars? Generally, I would say take the items that I've listed up. Oh, everything's telling me there's alerts now. I would generally take the names of the PC parts that I'm listing here and search in your own local PC store if that's where you're comfortable buying from. I am by no means saying you should buy from Novatech. I'm just using it because it's an easy way for me to see, choose the parts and see their prices. So for this one, we've gone for the Thermaltake Commander MSI Snow Edition case, and we're going to actually go into this tab here and have a little looky at it, because I quite like this case. The picture doesn't go as big as I'd like, but pretty roomy case. It's got easy slide drawers for hard drives and disk drives. That's the back of it there. Power supply goes at the bottom. You've got a nice exhaust fan there. Moving along to the next picture, you see the outside of the case, which I think looks pretty cool. I actually quite like the white look. And there is the side view. So you have a little bit of a slit window, so something with a, if you had an LED fan in there, that would look pretty sweet. And that is the front. So I quite like that. Indeed. And the main reason why I've chose it, as it says in its overview, It is supported with an extra long VGA support, which means it'll take some of the biggest cards on the market, such as, well, by the time when this case came out, the GTX 590 and the AMD Radeon 6990, which are dual GPU graphics cards. So this will definitely take all the graphics cards that are currently out, even stuff like the GTX 690 and what have you. So that's the case. I think it looks quite nice. It's only £43, which, as far as cases go, I still think that's pretty reasonable. When you're going up to like the 60, 70, 80 pound mark, I think that's when cases start to get a little bit silly. Yes, they do look nice, and ultimately it's going to be the main thing that you see of your PC all the time. So aesthetically, I guess go for the one that pleases you most. For this one, as I said, I chose the OCZ in the previous cheaper build. For this one, I've gone for the Corsair Enthusiast PSU. And that is 650 watts again, 80 plus bronze power supply certificate on there, so it'll hold at least 80% efficiency, which is good. No fluctuational issues there. It is more expensive, but Corsair do have great warranties, and they're very solid power supplies. They've made a great name for themselves in the power supply industry, so I would definitely recommend going for one of those if you've got the money for one. I've gone for the same 4th generation Intel i5-4670K processor. K edition, so you can overclock it, and if you're an enthusiast and spending this much money, I would definitely get a processor that you can overclock. Even if you never use that feature, it's better to have it rather than be restricted to a non-K version and not be able to overclock. Now, the graphics card, I put in a whopping £300 graphics card. It's actually the same graphics card that I have, the MSI GeForce GTX 770 Twin Frozor. The Twin Frozor is, as I can show you on here, a special cooling solution that MSI have put onto the GPU, and it keeps the graphics card very cool. Now I can actually tell you by just looking over to my secondary screen right now and tell you the precise temperature of my graphics card while it's idling, while it's just sitting here running some web pages. It's at 29 degrees Celsius, which is incredibly cool. The fan speed is only on 34%, and I've got it on automatic. And on the automatic fan speed, I've been running Rome Total War this morning. My graphics card has only gone up to 69 degrees, and then it came back down incredibly quickly. This thing cools it very fast, so you will not have an overheating issue with this graphics card. I will be making this build cheaper by swapping this graphics card out in a moment, and I'll be showing you some of the options that you can look at there. But that's if if you've got the money, you really want to go full guns blazing. This card will max any game you throw at it, providing it's well optimized. Oh, for Rome 2. We've gone for an MSI Z87 gaming motherboard. We'll have a quick look at this because it does look awesome. It is an awesome looking motherboard, and in fact my brother has this motherboard. It is a sweet ass motherboard. When it's a gaming edition, it basically helps with latency, basically making that everything is running as fast and everything is connecting as quickly and as smoothly as possible to give you the best experience. It's got a freaking dragon on it. I mean, it's awesome, and it's £119. The previous motherboard I showed you on the cheaper build, the first motherboard was £90. The cheaper one after that was £50. So if you're looking for an upgrade from the original motherboard, it's only £30 more. So it's not a huge increase, but it's a solid motherboard, plenty of expansion slots and things like that, and it should run very nicely with whatever you want to throw at it. After that, we got some pretty standard Corsair Vengeance 8GB. Gaming RAM. It's got some fins on it as well, which you can probably just see in the picture there, which help keep them slightly cool and helps airflow in the case. Doesn't do a huge amount, but they're pretty good set of gaming RAM. Gone for the same hard drive as last time. It's a 1GB edition. If you want to put a 2GB in, you can customize that and put it in yourself, but 1GB should be fine to get you started, and it's the same relatively cheap disk drive. So that's what you need. Also, I should note that the processor, both from this build and the previous one, because it's the same one, you get a free copy of Grid 2, which is a fun racing game. And also with the GTX 770, you get a free copy of Batman Arkham Origins, which releases in October, I believe. So, you're getting £60 worth of game there as well. So if you take the game price off it, that you're getting, or if you added the game price on it, you're getting quite a decent deal. But how can you make this cheaper? Because 850 quid probably is rather daunting. So let's quickly whack that graphics card off the price list. Without the graphics card, it's a very reasonable £557. Let's look at some options. So the option I would suggest, two options you could look at, is either a 660 Ti or a GTX 670. Now I'm actually going to tell you why you shouldn't bother with a 660 Ti if you're going to buy from Novatech, mainly because look at the price of the cheapest 660 Ti, £159.98. You get Batman Arkham Origins there, so you still don't lose out. But if we go over to the 670, the cheapest one is £190. Now, for £30 more, you can get the 670, which has the same number of CUBE cores as the Ti edition, and in some cases the Ti has quite fast clock speeds, but these cards a little bit more powerful. It's got a very good memory speed, and that is going to be more powerful than the Ti, but there's not much difference. So if you can't afford that extra 30 quid, if you are going to try and cut corners, the 660 Ti is still a great graphics card to go for, and it's quite cheap. But even saying that, since the 700 series of graphics cards have come out, the prices of the 670s have plummeted. These used to be around about £250, so they've come down by over £60 so far, so that's pretty darn good, and you still get that copy of Batman Arkham Origins, as I said. So what's not to love there? But if we'll add one of these 670s in, because that's ideally the card I'd probably go for. We take it now to a price of £747, so let's say £750. So we've saved £100 there by dropping the graphics card down to one that, it's not going to drop out too many frames. Depending on the game, there's going to be variable amounts of frames, but you can have a look at some benchmarks for the two cards and see whether it's worth it or not. I went personally for an upgrade for Rome 2 and for all the other games that are coming out this year and next year for a 770, purely because it's going to last me longer. But at collection, that is quite a hefty Enthusiast PC at £747. The sad thing is that's not too much up from what I supposedly said was a cheaper PC option. Now, obviously I could build you a far cheaper PC, but what I'm trying to do is basically give you guys the best pre-built system that's going to run games at near to maximum settings as possible, which is why that previous PC was still quite expensive. If you are happy to, drop graphic settings down to low or medium, you can quite happily still build a PC for £400 to £500, including an operating system. And if you'd be interested in me specking you out one of those, feel free to send me a PM or an email. Links to the email, my email address, contact@lionheartx10.co.uk, is in the description. So I'm more than happy to run through some even cheaper builds, as long as you're willing to understand that you are going to see a drop in quality. The reason why that cheaper build was still quite expensive, even though we could cut the price down to £580, £560 ish, was because I'm trying to get you guys a solid PC that's going to run at maximum settings as long as possible, basically, and also looking at future proofing, spending a little bit more so that it lasts longer. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. I will just show you briefly a comparison of kind of the high-end performance PCs to what Novatech offer. So, let's go to what we've currently got in a 670. You go back over to Novatech's offering here, the Novatech Black NTI 59. It's got the same processor. It's got a solid state hard drive, which is what I've got this screen up for here, and what I previously had up on the previous cheaper build. £67. You could add that in if you want the solid state. Let's close that down. So coming back to the NTI 59. It's got a solid state hard drive in there, fair enough. It's only got a GTX 650 Ti, which is a lot less powerful than a GTX 670, and less powerful obviously than the 660 Ti too. It's not got as expensive motherboard. It's got a bigger hard drive, and it's got the same amount of RAM, but it's only got a 500 watt PSU, which will still be fine and will still run all these cards. The 650 isn't as power hungry as the 670, but a 600 watt power supply will generally run you fine. As you can see, if we go down to the NTI 56, we can see that they put in a GTX 660, the non-TI edition, and they've given it a 600 watt power supply. So the 650 power supplies are a pretty good guess. But that is 794, and you're not getting anywhere near the same amount of performance in terms of graphics card. Yes, you're getting a solid state hard drive in there, but the graphics card isn't the same. It isn't anywhere near close. If you took out the solid state and then up the graphics card, it would be pretty much the same price as our pre-built. So that's something to bear in mind. So it's pretty similar pricing. But looking at pre-builts, if we're going to look for something that's got the same processor and a very powerful graphics card, which is probably, we're not going to see. We've gone to i7s here, but Obviously Novatech don't swap over to, you know, the GTX 670s or the 770s. Oh, here we go. So we've got a GTX 670 here, including the i7 edition. It does have far more RAM, but that goes up to £1,000. So generally, it is going to be a bit cheaper. Tweaking around, obviously, as I said, that's got an i7 processor, so it's going to be a bit more expensive. But it is worth having a look, see if you can if you can build your PC out of parts, or if you want to, and if you buy from a PC Parts website, you should often check to see if they will actually put together your PC for you. Novatech will do this at a charge of £50 per hour for labour charges, but I've never heard of any incident where they've taken more than an hour to build a PC. Normally, what it used to be, it used to be a flat rate £50 extra fee on top, because they would just build your PC no matter what the time. But I've seen several friends go through the process and have them build their PC for them, and it has never taken more than 1 hour. They've only ever been charged for 1 hour's labour cost at £50. So if you can afford, you know, a little bit extra, and you're worried about, you know, messing up some of the connections or something like that, which is fair enough, then you can always see if the site you're buying it from, you know, supports they'll build your parts for you, as it were. And it's also useful because that'll also mean that they'll check to see if everything's compatible, because they won't just suddenly snap it all together and then wonder why it won't work. So, I hope you found this video useful. As I've tried to stress, these may not be the cheapest builds you'll find, but what I'm trying to stress is that they will be reliable for near maximum, if not maximum, gaming performance in all the latest games, including Total War Rome 2, once it's fully optimized and patched and driver support is out there. Obviously I haven't looked too much at AMD processors or graphics cards, mainly because I don't know that much about them, so I don't want to confuse you guys with me getting confused with AMD stuff that I really don't understand. But obviously, if you do know a good build, feel free to post it in the comments, whether that's using Intel or AMD stuff. And as I said, Novatech may well not be the cheapest place. Also, those of you guys watching from other countries, including the United States and Europe, I've given you a rough idea of what the prices are. Best thing you can do is Google, you know, the £650, 560, and the 750, 850 pound brackets that I put up these two PCs at, and convert them into your own local currency. But I should stress, check with your own country's kind of local PC part websites like Novatech. Have a look for some of these, because you may well find they'll be a lot cheaper. I certainly know for a fact that PC parts are cheaper in the States with the currency conversion. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be a gaming laptop kind of buyer's guide which will be up soon. That won't be anywhere near as long as this one, because gaming laptops, it's quite a different tale, and in that video I probably will be linking back to this one quite a bit. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Please do remember to comment, rate, subscribe. Ciao for now.